When I first saw him that night, I didn't think much of it. The Miami heat wrapped around me like a blanket as I stepped into the small, tucked-away restaurant. The place was buzzing, filled with laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of place you'd pick for a casual date. The lights were dim, soft enough to make everyone look better in the glow, but not too dark to feel mysterious. I sat at a small table by the window trying to relax. My friend Nina had insisted I go on this date, reminding me for the millionth time that moving on was important. "You can't let him control you even now," she'd said. The him was Chris, my ex-fiancé. We had ended things a month ago, but it felt like yesterday. My heart still clenched at the thought of his face, that twisted anger in his eyes when we'd fought. I shook my head to clear the memory. No, this night was supposed to be about something new. My date, Marco, walked in, and I noticed he had that easy smile that made you forget your nerves. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, ordering drinks and settling in. The conversation was light at first, jokes about work and the struggles of Miami traffic. But I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling, a sense that someone was watching me. Every time I glanced out the window, the bustling crowd and neon lights made it impossible to see clearly. Yet, there it was, a familiar silhouette just across the street, a figure standing too still to be casual. I forced a laugh as Marco told a story about his college days, but my eyes kept darting back, checking if the shadow had moved. It didn't. The night dragged on, and I felt that unease turning into a solid weight in my chest. Marco noticed I was distracted and asked if everything was okay. I just nodded, pretending that the stress from work was getting to me. But inside, I was screaming. I told myself it was paranoia, just leftover fear from the past month. By the time Marco walked me to my car, I was practically vibrating with anxiety. The sidewalk was empty now, save for a couple waiting for an Uber at the corner. Marco said goodbye, his smile kind but confused. He probably wouldn't call again, I thought. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. That's when I saw him. Standing at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden behind a row of palms, Chris's eyes met mine. I turned the key and drove, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to make it home. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror as I drove, the city lights streaking past in a blur. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the low hum of the radio. Was he following me? Every dark SUV or sedan felt like it could be his. My mind raced, replaying every argument, every threat he'd ever whispered when he thought I couldn't leave him. Miami at night was alive, but in my car I felt trapped, boxed in by the memories and the fear that seemed to thrum beneath my skin. I took a left onto a quieter street, then another right, trying to lose any tail that might be there. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a movie, but Chris was smart. I'd seen how calculated he could be. If he wanted to follow me, he'd make sure I wouldn't know until it was too late. I parked 3 blocks from my apartment and cut the engine, sitting in silence with my hand still clutching the key. The street was quiet, just a stray cat darting under a car and a distant thump of music from someone's window. I scanned the area, squinting at the dimly lit sidewalk and shadowy corners. Nothing moved. Taking a deep breath, I slid out of the car and shut the door as quietly as I could. My shoes echoed against the concrete, each step sounding louder than the last. I forced myself to walk calmly, not wanting to draw attention. Maybe I'd imagined seeing him. Maybe my brain was just playing tricks on me, turning every shadow into Chris. But when I passed the old cracked steps of the building next to mine, a shiver ran down my spine. The feeling was back, eyes on me. I stole a glance over my shoulder and saw a man's figure, partially obscured by the glow of a street lamp. He was far enough that I couldn't see his face, but I knew. It was him. My pace quickened, and I reached for my keys, fumbling as I approached my building's entrance. The metallic jingle felt deafening, echoing in the stillness. The lock clicked, and I shoved the door open, throwing myself into the safety of the lobby and locking it behind me. My breathing was ragged as I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the door, peering out. He was gone. The sidewalk was empty again. The figure vanished as if he'd never been there. But I knew better. Chris was always good at disappearing when he wanted to. I hurried up the stairs to my apartment, skipping steps and nearly tripping over my own feet. Once inside, I double-locked the door and slid the chain into place. My apartment felt too quiet, too dark. I flipped on every light as I walked through, checking the windows and peering into the closet and under the bed like a child afraid of monsters. Only my monster was real. The rest of the night, I sat curled up on the couch, phone in hand, debating whether to call someone, Nina, the police, anyone. But what would I say? That I saw my ex across the street? That I felt watched? I could already hear their voices telling me it was nothing, that I was letting my imagination run wild. The street outside remained still, the world moving on while I stayed locked in my fear. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every car that passed sent my heart racing. I knew it wasn't over. Chris had found me once. He'd find me again. I just had to make sure I was ready when he did. After graduating college, money was tight, so I had to find a roommate to share an apartment. That's when I met Leo. We connected through a random listing online, and after a quick chat, I thought he seemed okay. He had a heavy accent that I couldn't quite place, but his demeanor was friendly enough. The apartment was simple, just what I needed. My room was small but cozy, already furnished with a twin bed, a dresser, a closet, and a TV stand. However, there was one thing that caught my eye. A giant stuffed rabbit perched on the dresser, its button eyes fixed in a creepy stare. I asked Leo about it, and he just chuckled, saying it belonged to the landlord's daughter and not to disturb it. I thought it was odd, but I shrugged it off and went back to unpacking my things. That first night, after a long day of moving and setting up my space, I lay in bed, trying to relax with some TV. It was then I heard a noise. At first it was faint, almost like the sound of a soft beeping. I turned off the TV and strained to listen, but it faded away. Maybe it was just the pipes, I thought, dismissing the sound as I drifted off to sleep. The next day, I returned home from work, exhausted but ready to settle in. Leo wasn't around. He usually had a job that kept him out late. I flopped onto my bed, too tired to even unpack the last of my boxes. It wasn't until later, while changing into my pajamas, that I heard the sound again. The soft beeping, now accompanied by what sounded like static. I stood still for a moment, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. When I saw Leo the next day, he asked about the book I had been reading. I was puzzled I hadn't mentioned it to him. It took me a moment, and then he explained he'd gone into my room while I was out to grab something. He casually mentioned seeing my book on the bed. My stomach dropped. I didn't remember leaving it there, and the door didn't have a lock. That night, I pulled out my book from under the bed where I had tucked it away. But as I looked around the room, my heart raced at the sight of that stuffed rabbit again. Its gaze felt different this time, almost like it was watching me. A thought crept into my mind. How had Leo seen my book if it was hidden? I tried to shake it off as paranoia, but I couldn't ignore the chill that ran down my spine. I stood up and walked over to the rabbit, its fur still pristine. I reached out to touch it, and my heart skipped a beat when I noticed something shiny peeking out from one of its eye sockets. A tiny camera lens. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. I could barely breathe as I rushed to Leo's door, pounding on it, my voice cracking as I screamed his name. I could hear rustling inside, but he didn't respond. The light under the door flickered and went dark, leaving me standing in the cold, dim hallway. I felt trapped, like I was in a horror movie, and the villain was right behind me. I sprinted back to my room and grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed the landlord. I told him everything, the strange noises, the camera and the stuffed rabbit, Leo's invasion of my privacy. I'm leaving right now, I insisted. This is not safe. I packed a small bag, throwing in some clothes and essentials, my heart racing with every noise from the hallway. The thought of confronting Leo made my skin crawl, but I had to escape. I dashed out of the apartment, the adrenaline pushing me forward, and didn't stop until I reached my car. As I drove away, the city lights blurred past and a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't look back, not once. The landlord never contacted me about the rent for those few days. I didn't care. I felt free, but also haunted by what had happened. Even now, stuffed animals make my heart race. I can't stand the way they seem to watch me. I always turn them away or put them in a closet. Just thinking about that rabbit and the camera makes me uneasy, a reminder that some people aren't who they seem. Back in 2007, when online dating was still a bit of a novelty, I was trying my luck with a few different sites. My name is Emily, and at that point in my life, I was craving connection. I'd gone on a few uneventful dates, but nothing clicked. One evening, I came across a profile that seemed to tick all the boxes: shared hobbies, favorite bands, even a similar taste in movies. His name was Alex, and after exchanging a few messages, we decided to meet for coffee at a popular cafe downtown. When I first saw Alex, he looked normal enough. Clean cut, a warm smile, the type of person who could blend into any crowd. The conversation was smooth at first, light and friendly. He told me he was studying medicine at the local university, which I found impressive. But as we finished our drinks, he suggested we take a walk. Something in his voice changed, almost too eager, a strange shift in energy. But I shrugged it off and agreed. The walk started out harmless. We wandered past shop windows and laughed about little things. But as we moved further from the bustling cafe and deeper into quieter streets, Alex's demeanor began to change. He became quieter, glancing over his shoulder and rubbing his hands on his jeans like he was anxious. I asked him something about his classes, but he only nodded without making eye contact. My gut twisted with unease. I realized we were no longer in the busy part of town. The streetlights were dim, and the sound of traffic was distant. I forced a smile and said, "Hey, we should probably head back. It's getting late." I turned, ready to walk back toward the main road. But Alex grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "Wait," he said, eyes locked onto mine. "There's something I need to tell you." Panic surged through me. His grip was too tight, and there was a sharpness in his stare that sent every instinct into overdrive. I was stuck, far from anyone who could help. He led me to a bench, and though I wanted to run, my legs felt paralyzed. I sat, hoping to play along and keep him calm. Alex leaned in, still holding my arm, and started talking in a low, almost rehearsed voice. "I've been watching you for a long time, Emily, before we ever talked online. I know the places you go with your friends. I know what you like to laugh about. I even know where you work and which classes you took at school." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. He kept rattling off details about my life, details he shouldn't have known. He explained how he'd tailored his dating profile to match mine, ensuring I'd feel a connection and agree to meet him. His words twisted around me like a net, and the realization hit me. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. He slid his hand from my arm to my thigh, gripping it as he whispered, "Now that I have you, I'm never letting you go." I forced a smile, my mind racing for an escape. I'd kept my phone hidden in my jacket pocket, and with my free hand I sent a text to my friend Josh, who worked nearby. "Danger. Need help. Come fast." Alex kept talking, oblivious to my movements, until I noticed the headlights of a familiar truck coming down the street. My body tensed as relief surged through me. I waited until Josh was close, and then, with all the strength I could muster, I yanked myself free from Alex's grasp and bolted toward the truck. He yelled behind me, his footsteps slapping against the pavement as he gave chase. The distance between us shrank and fear clawed at my throat. I reached Josh's truck just in time, throwing myself into the back as it sped forward, tires screeching. I glanced back to see Alex stumbling to a stop on the sidewalk, shouting curses into the night as we disappeared around the corner. My hands shook uncontrollably, and tears pricked at my eyes. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten away, and I don't want to imagine it. I deleted my dating profiles the next day and never looked back.